Welcome everyone to Chicana Chicano Studies 100, Introduction to Chicana Chicano Studies. My name is Dr. Miguel Chavez. I am an assistant professor at Imperial Valley College. Now, before we jump into the curriculum, we need to define what is Chicana Chicano Studies. Well, first and foremost, at the heart of Chicana Chicano Studies are identity politics. Now, what do we mean by identity? For our purposes, an identity is a social construction. It is a social construct. That means that a group got together and created these identities. These identities can either be created for you or you can create one yourself that you can assert, reassert, and enforce. Now, when we talk about politics, what are politics? Politics are social relations to govern resources. They are the relationships that we develop in the public to negotiate resources for our communities. So when we put these two together, what are identity politics? We're talking about American, Mexican, Mexican-American, Chicana, Chicano, as well as Latina, Latino, and Raza. Each of these identities is very important to understand that each of these identities have their own historical context. For example, the Mexican-American identity. The Mexican-American identity was made popular during World War II. It was created by the federal government when the federal government rediscovered Mexican-Americans in the Southwest due to the high casualties and deaths that Mexican-Americans experienced in Europe during World War II when they were sacrificing their lives for democracy. It was the federal government when they started taking toll of the casualties that it realized that there was a huge presence of Mexican Americans in the Southwest. And there we have the origins of the term Mexican American. Now, the Chicano identity also has its historical context. The term Chicano at one point in history had negative connotations. It was used disparagingly. But it wasn't until the 1960s that Chicanas and that ethnic Mexican-American youth reappropriated the term and turned it into a positive. Whereas once it had negative connotations, Chicana, Chicano became a positive identity because it was used as an identity to organize and mobilize Mexican Americans during the 1960s and 1970s to create social movements to challenge injustices in the schools, in businesses, in public spaces, etc. Now, the term Latina, Latino, and Raza also have their historical contexts. When we talk about Latina, Latino identities, we're using it as an umbrella term for Spanish-speaking communities in the U.S. Same thing with the term Raza. The term Raza was made popular during the civil rights movement for the Chicana, Chicano movement in particular. Now, when we talk about these identities, American, Mexican, Mexican-American, Chicana, Chicano, Latina, Latino, Raza, it's very important to understand that when we talk about American and Mexican, we are referring to a nationality. When we talk about Mexican-American and Chicana, Chicanos, we're talking about and we're using it within a particular context. Here we're talking about cultural, ethnic, and political identities. When we use the terms Latina, Latino, and Raza, here we're using these terms to identify a peoplehood. We're going to be using multiple theories to examine the experiences of Mexican Americans in the U.S., Chicanas and Chicanos. We're also going to be borrowing different methods from different disciplines because our approach to Chicana, Chicano studies is going to be interdisciplinary. For us, it's very important to understand that we're going to be using theories on race, class, and gender. We're also going to be learning about ideology, hegemony, counter-hegemony, and most importantly, culture. We're going to be using different methods. We're going to be drawing methods from the social sciences that are empirical, and we're also going to be using methods from the humanities that are analytical, critical, and speculative. Because our field is interdisciplinary, that means we borrow from different disciplines, our approach to Chicana Chicano studies is going to be interdisciplinary. So we're going to be borrowing and reading material from history, sociology, political science, as well as literary criticism. We're going to focus our theories and our methods, and we're going to apply them to the history of the Chicana Chicano movement. Now, it's very important for us to understand that Chicana Chicano movement was a coalescing of multiple movements throughout the country that came together during the Vietnam War era. The movements that came together during this era to create a national Chicano movement included the student movement, the farm workers movement, the land movement, and movements for social justice and civil rights. It's also important for us to understand the Chicana Chicano movement as a movement of resistance, of counter-hegemony, of challenging the dominant institutions that were used to systematically marginalize Chicanas and Chicanos in the U.S. This movement emerged out of the Vietnam War era, an era that was liberal, an era that was different than the Mexican-American generation. Remember, the Mexican-American generation thrived beginning with World War II, with Mexican-American veterans returning from Vietnam and becoming aware that despite of their sacrifice for democracy, they were still discriminated in businesses, in schools, and in public spaces. I also want us to understand the Chicana Chicano movement was a quest for a paradigm. It was a movement in which Chicanas and Chicanos were searching for intellectual production. They were searching for epistemologies because it was very important to understand their historical moment. So it was critical for them to develop the tools to study the movement. And out of this movement emerged our Chicana Chicano organic intellectuals, including Dr. Octavio Romano, who was the first Mexican-American to establish the first journal on Mexican-American thought, titled El Grito, a journal of contemporary Mexican-American thought. Second very important intellectual that we will be learning about in the course and through our reading assignments is Dr. Juan Gómez Quiñones. Dr. Juan Gómez Quiñones is a pillar of Chicana Chicano studies, and he helped found the second most important journal to come out of the Chicana Chicano movement entitled Aztlán, a journal for Chicana Chicano studies.